Hello and welcome. My name's Kathy A, and today I'm going to throw a little curveball into my usual YouTube channel content. I recently got a job about 2 months ago now in the funeral and cemetery industry, and I know, but I have learned so much about it that I wanted to share some of that knowledge with you. I get the phone calls from people who their parents just passed away suddenly, or somebody just passed away, and they're calling and they're like, I don't know what to do. How much does it cost? You know, what happens? And these people have no plan in place. The people that passed away didn't have any kind of records or plans. Their papers weren't in order. Nothing was together. So they had to kind of try to sit through their stuff, look for papers. They had to try to guess what their parents would have wanted. Did they want to be cremated? Did they want to be buried like in the cemetery with grandma? And it was like, wow, you know, there's so much that people don't know. But even more so, there's so much that you can do in advance that will help those who care about you take care of things. Take care of your mess. Take care of your stuff. Make sure everything's okay and goes smoothly. And it can go so much smoother if you plan it. You know, in life, like some of you are parents, and you remember when that first baby was coming, you had a whole room set up. You had the crib, you had the monitor, you had the bassinet, you had the rocking chair, you had all the bottles and all the doodads and things you needed for the baby's feedings, and you had books, you know, what to expect when you're expecting, and you had all your friends and family were right on you, telling you all their advice and all this. Everybody, it was all conversation. Everybody was talking about it all the time, no matter what. And then it just started to get bigger. Even strangers were coming up to you and go, what do you do? Oh, gee. Everybody wants to talk about it, right? Got a car seat for the car. You know, you were all ready. You were ready. You were planned and ready. How about a vacation? You plan, where are we going to go? Do we need passports? Where are we going to stay when we get there? What are we going to see? Do we need to buy tickets in advance before we go? When are we coming back? Do we have insurance for if we get sick overseas? Who's going to take care of our pets and take care of everything while we're gone? Who's going to stop the mail? You know, you plan all that stuff for a vacation, and then the ultimate in planning, the wedding. Man, I had more fun planning both of my weddings than I had at the wedding itself, and definitely more fun than the marriages, but that's another story. You plan a wedding, you plan who your best man is, who the maid of honor is, what kind of ceremony you're going to have. You're going to have this big booming thing at the big church with all the stained glass and hundreds of people, an organist, maybe. You have all kinds of plans for the ceremony. Going to talk to the clergy beforehand, perhaps, or maybe justice of the peace out on the beach, barefoot, just a handful of people, maybe. You know, it's all up to you. You have kind of a thing. You know, everybody's got their own style, their own way of doing things. Some people are a little more formal, some people are more hippy-dippy. But you kind of make that wedding ceremony fit who you are. And then afterwards, do you rent a limo? You want everybody to go in a limo to the reception area? Where are you going to have the reception? You're going to have it at a really nice hotel with a DJ or a live band? Are you going to have music at all? Just going to have dinner for everybody? Going to have a night before dinner with the in-laws? All these things are planned, right down to what everybody's going to wear. So, when it comes to funeral planning, and we know this event is coming, we just don't know the date. And I think that's the difference between knowing a vacation, a birthday party, a wedding, or anything like that. You know the date. And a funeral, you don't know the date. You really don't know the date. So it's like you keep pushing it off. It's almost like, well, if I don't plan my funeral, I won't die. You know, I just keep pushing it off because I don't want to think about that. I got work to do. I got things to do today. I got the weekend. There's Sephora sales going on. I got stuff going on. I don't want to think about planning a funeral. Somebody else will take care of that. They'll take care of it. I'll just donate my body to science. My kids will take care of it. My spouse will take care of it. The guy I live with will take care of it. He knows what I want. We've talked about it here and there, so we'll do it. I don't know how much it costs, but well, maybe we'll get some insurance or something. I don't know, but I just, I'm 64. I'm kind of in good health, except for, a little bit of sugar and a little bit of sheepdog peanut butter whiskey. I actually, I'm okay, and I have a stationary bike that I will ride once in a while. I take the books and the coats off of it, and I get on there and watch TV with it sometimes. When you fall off that stationary bike and hit your head on the coffee table and fall, a week later people are wondering where that nice lady from the mailroom is, because all of her Amazon packages and Sephora packages and Ulta packages are piling up and her mailbox is full. Nobody's answering at the door and her car hasn't moved in 2 weeks. Good timing. Like my family, we don't dislike each other at all. We get along just fine, but we're not in each other's worlds. We have friends that I've known for years, and my family doesn't know that much about me. And when I die, they look at your phone first, and they're like, who's their emergency contact? Better take him out. The ex-husband's listed. Oops. My sister, my brothers, they're listed. Who are they going to call? One of them. Okay. Do they even know where I live? I just got divorced and I moved. I changed my name. Do they even know my name? All my new IDs are here. They're going to say, Kathy who? My new name. So, you need to look at your phone at who's in your emergency contacts, and actually other people too. Identify who they are. This is coworker, boss, this is cousin, aunt, uncle. Put down who people are in your contacts, so when the police find your phone, if they find your phone, they can look down the line and say, here's a relative, we'll call them. If you don't have an emergency contact list, and you really should, those are the people that know you best, hopefully, and those are the people they're going to call first. They have to ID a body. They have to come in and take care of your stuff. And I bet, like me, you haven't made any of those kind of arrangements. Well, I don't have any kids, it doesn't matter. Well, yeah, it does, because you won't believe how many people are affected by you indirectly. Your bank accounts, your car loan, your apartment that you rent, all your stuff. What happens to all that stuff? Who's taking it? What's happening to it? And then your body, what's happening to that? So in this video, what I thought I would do is kind of go through all the different ways that you can be buried or scattered or given to the sea or put under the coral reef or sent out in space or wear a mushroom suit. We're going to go over everything and its cost approximate, so you can see what kinds of things are available out there and how the process works. And it'll make you want to plan your funeral. Take a couple hours on a Sunday afternoon. I know you do this once a year for something you also don't like to do, which is the taxes. You go through your taxes, you get all your papers together, and you do that. You do that every year and you don't want to, but you do it. And boy, I tell you, after you finish those taxes, I don't care if you owe or not, you are just like, oh, they're done. Oh. And that's how you're going to feel once you get your funeral planned. One of the greatest tools that I have found is there's books out there. They're workbooks. And this kind of a workbook is putting things in order to help my loved ones when I'm gone. And what these are they are workbooks that ask you questions. Answer questions about your life, about your possessions, about your biography. You can write your own obituary. Would you really like somebody else to write your obituary? Have you read obituaries in like that? I have to read them every day because of my job, but have you ever read some of the people's obituaries? You can tell whoever wrote it didn't know that person at all. And wouldn't it be nice if you could write your own obituary? and have a picture that's so nice of you. Something really nice, lightly photoshopped, maybe, you know, a little bit pleasant expression, looking thin. You know, you'd love to have that as the representation of you for eternity, correct? You can also have one of those made into a cameo picture and put on a grave so you can smile at people when they're looking at your grave. That's kind of a neat connection thing. But you know, a lot of times obituaries read like, died suddenly at home, service at such and such, sadly missed by parents, predeceased by, you know, sister, brother, grandparents, and then there's a laundry list of people that go underneath, a cousin and his husband from Toledo, and so and her second niece and her husband that live in, you know, Chattanooga. Well, newspapers charge you by the word, and you know, they're paying like $300 to $1,000 for an obituary with a crummy picture, hardly any info about you, and this list of people this long that perhaps maybe you forgot Cousin Lori. Everybody's there but Cousin Lori, and Cousin Lori reads your obituary and like, where's my name? You know, so when you list all these people, you're wasting money on that. Really should only put the main players in. The husband, the wife, the kids, the grandkids, brother, sister. You know, you don't need all those other people listed as sadly missed by extended family and friends. Period. And put more stuff about you up top. And you write it. You write it. I mean, I don't even know if my sister and brothers know my life. They kind of know because they get those silly journal Christmas letters from me every year, but they may not remember all this stuff. It's a very traumatic time for a family when they lose somebody. But anyway, this book is really good because it's substantial. It's kind of a hardback. You can get them on Amazon. There's a bunch of different books, and they all have basically the same kind of information in them, but I like this one because, if you can see that, there's tabs all across here, and there's tabs for your personal, your medical, key contacts. At the time of my passing, this is what should happen, my dependents, my important documents, financial information, if I have a business or private business, if I rent out space, maybe I'm a landlord and I own a property and somebody else is renting, my tenant information would be in here. My pets. So this book puts all the information of your life together in one place, and you can gather all of those important documents that you have in one place. Now this is a, you can't probably see it very well, but it is a black accordion folder file. And what you can do is you can, with each of these tabs, you can put down, you know, this is my birth certificate, marriage certificate, divorce decrees, name changes, bankruptcy settlements or bankruptcy payments you're making, information about your boat, your guns, your refrigerator, your car loans, house loans, if you have a timeshare in Florida or a cabin in Maine, bicycles, motorcycles, things you have in storage. Do you have a storage unit? Do you have a P.O. box? These things can all be kept here along with the photo that you want to use for your obituary, and the photo maybe you want to use for your gravestone cameo. You can put all that stuff in here. They got it all right there. You know, and a book like this and paperwork like this will help them so much. It's the greatest gift you can give to your family after you're gone. This is the Bible of you. And this one is my favorite. It's about $13 on Amazon, and it is so worth it. I mean, they don't know me. I'm not working for them. I'm not this is not a sponsored video for sure. In fact, my family and my job are both probably going to hate me after this. But this is a great thing to do. Sit down on a Sunday afternoon like you do with the taxes and just fill out the questions. Pretend Letterman's interviewing you, okay? Asking you simple questions about your life, your finances, and your certificates you have. Where's your valuables? Important papers. If you put all your important papers, your passport, all that stuff, all your insurance papers and everything in here, you scan them, put them on a thumb drive, and have them somewhere else safe. So you've got them in two formats, you've got them here. You put this with this book in your top drawer of your desk or your computer drawer or something, and your family finds this and they know what to do. It is the greatest gift you can give them. It really is. So, let's go over some of the things about post-death that may interest you. It will, promise. I remember when my father and I went to lunch, and he's like, if I kick the bucket, he has a southern accent, if I kick the bucket, I gotta have you do, and I'm like, Dad, I don't want to talk about that. Let's just enjoy our dinner. I didn't want to hear it. So what he did, because none of us wanted to talk to him about his death, because it was too morbid, and it was kind of not far away, as far as we knew. He was in his 80s. We didn't want to talk about it with him. It's just not. It's not the same thing like the baby thing, where everybody and their uncle has an opinion on funerals. It's like, well, I think we used Sturgeon and Sons or something for Grandma's funeral. I don't remember. They were nice. That's the kind of advice you get from your friends and family. They don't say, oh, if you call around to 3 different funeral homes, you may get a better price on your funeral, and if you cut down on some of those services, you can really bring the price down. Do you know how much a funeral costs? With the embalming and all that stuff? And a night before a wake at the funeral home where all the neighbors and friends can come over and bid adieu. Do you know how much that stuff costs? Ballpark? State by state, slight differences there, but the average cost is around 10 grand. $10,000. Goes up, believe me, with all the little amenities. Do you want a horse-drawn glass hearse taking you through town for that last time? That beefs it up a little bit. Limo for the family? That beefs it up. And it's not even fun. A limo for the family. I've been in it now twice. I've been in for the first family limo thing. It's not even fun. You can't like stick your hands up out the mirror and and have champagne or anything. You can't. You're sitting there like waiting to get to the cemetery. It is the worst limo ride of your life. It is terrible. It's and one of them was the first limo ride I ever had. I'm like, it's a limo, and it's like. Then we were going to the cemetery. Are you a military veteran? Because military veterans actually deserve and they can get a free grave, they can get a free gravestone or a free marker, and an emblem, a military emblem. Now my dad had that. He didn't get the free grave, but he did get the emblem and the flag. He gets the flag put on his grave. That you just have to have your paperwork there, and again, you want to have it. Make sure you've noted that in here, because when your family goes to plan your funeral, if your beloved was a veteran, he or she deserves a free grave, a free marker, marker stone or a marker, and is certain cemeteries that will have a section just for the military folks. So if that's something you want, put your paperwork in here, your DD 214 or whatever it is that you have, your discharge papers, and you will have a free grave spot and a free grave marker. And that's a really nice aspect about military service. And why would you even want to plan it now? You're healthy, everything's fine. Why would you know? I'm 64, I have all my faculties. That's why. You get all your faculties. And the people I need to know stuff are still around. I can talk to them. I can send them a note. I can text them. I'm at least going to text the people in my emergency contacts and say, hey, hi, it's your sister. I know we haven't talked in a while, but you're in my emergency contacts, and just in case, because I travel every weekend, just in case I don't make it home one day and the police call you, I have this book and this book and this book in my top drawer on my computer. And my last name is Collins now. If you don't want to call your emergency contacts, which seems kind of silly, you can text them. Make sure you're texting the right number and you're not giving strangers all this information. Another good reason to call and actually speak back and forth. You can prepay for a lot of the situation, or you can take out insurance now that will pay a lot of those costs. Do you know right now, because COVID-19 is kind of a thing right now, that FEMA, you know, the federal emergency people, they will pay for a lot of the funerals. If you die of COVID-19, FEMA's going to pay for a lot of your funeral. I think right now the number's around $9,000. It was higher before, but they're starting to lose money because it's bigger than they thought. I think they weren't ready. But they're paying money for funerals for people who die of COVID-19. Funeral directors know this, and they sign up for it because obviously, if you've got some help paying for this, you might get that glass horse drawn through town, you know? You might go for those extra little thingies if you know you got some money coming. Anyway, now is the best time because your wishes will be granted. If you want your body cremated and your ashes spread gently over the hillside by the hairpin turn in North Adams, Massachusetts on a balmy October afternoon with the orange and red trees abounding below, with The Cure in the background or Depeche Mode, maybe that Lorena McKennitt song, you can. You've got it all in the plan. You've told somebody. You've got it in the book. It's in the book. This is what I want done. They ask you in here, do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be embalmed? Do you want a full mass? What's your favorite hymns? What's your favorite music? It's just amazing how many details that you can pre-plan and actually put into place. You can talk to clergy if you're a member of a church or a synagogue. You can talk to them about what you would like done with your things. Now, I know in the Jewish tradition, everything's kind of preset and they have a plan. You know, within 48 hours, they like to have you, you know, washed and dressed in a shroud or with your prayer shawl in the ground in a pine box within 48 hours. And then there's this period of mourning where people will bring food and comfort those who are left behind. I mean, it's very practical and very nice. There's no flowers being sent and fluffy stuff. It's kind of like we take care of the dead with respect. The longer you wait, the more disrespectful it is in that tradition. So not everybody has the luxury of that kind of discipline or that kind of a support group. A lot of us are not members of churches, or we're not members of groups that will be able to do this for us. So we have to kind of take things under our own command. And one of those things is, you know, like if you want to be embalmed and you want to be laid out on a Wednesday night so that all your coworkers and friends and family and neighbors and old classmates can come and pay their tribute to you, you can control these details. You can prepay for a lot of them, and you can prepare your family for what to do. Now, you may not use any of this for 30 years, and I'd like to think that that's the truth. But nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. You know, a lot of people under the age of 50 die now, more so than any other time in history. We're losing under 50s. The reason? Distracted driving, opioid addictions, and suicides. Those three things are taking our young people more so than any other. You think it's just old people in a nursing home who are sick and dying that are in the cemeteries? I work there, and I can say every day I get somebody who's 50 or under. Every day. So You may think that you're in good health, everything's fine, but then you're driving to work and some distracted driver head-ons into you. And I'm not a fatalist here. I don't mean to be so Debbie Downer, but if you're prepared, then when the worst happens, if it's a surprise like that, they've got a chance to get things in order. Because the calls I get from people, they've lost somebody they really love and they don't know what to do. They're terrified. They don't have any money. They don't know what to do. They don't know even if their parents have a cemetery plot. Nothing was planned. Nothing was talked about because they'd rather talk about their day or going shopping or the Sephora sale. They don't want to talk about their funeral. And I did the same thing with my father when he wanted to talk about it with me. And he made me executor of his will because he knew I would be fair and I would do what he wanted. And I'm so glad he pre-planned so many. He got the plots. He put the stones up for him and my mom. And he had everything chiseled out except his death date. He had it all planned. Now there's a few of the funeral expenses that you can't prepay. You can't prepay for them to open the grave, to put the casket or the box in with the cremains in it, and then cover it back up. You can't prepay for that. Can't prepay for endowed care because they don't know what that's going to cost. I'll go over that stuff a little later. But you can prepay for a lot, or at least prepare for it by getting an insurance in place that will pay for a lot of those expenses. Because you don't want to saddle your family on top of the fact that you didn't make any kinds of plans and they have to make some big decisions. They have financial burdens now that they wouldn't have had. They wanted to send their kids to college. They wanted to buy a new car. Now they have to pay for your funeral. And I know that sounds really harsh, but, it would be so nice if you could pre-plan things for them so they have a clue where to go with the information you give them. And if there's funding involved, they need to know, where are your insurance plans? Well, all your insurance papers are in here. And all the information about your insurance is in here. So between these two things, you're going to have it. All right. So let's go over the different types of burials and disposition of your remains. Now, I think you, regardless of your ideology, will agree with me that once your body has died, you're no longer there. You're somewhere else. Either you've joined Abraham and the source in the vortex, or you've gone off to God, or you've gone off to Allah, or you've gone off to the Summerlands, or you've gone to the West. I mean, there's a million theories. We all have theories about what happens after our bodies die. Some are correct, probably, some not so much. But either way, I think we can all agree that once the body has passed and you're not there anymore, you're not using that body anymore. So those are now your remains or your body. What about Mr. Barkey? Mr. Barkey's at home waiting for you. Do you want Mr. Barkey to be taken care of? So that's another thing. You may not have kids, but a lot of people that don't have kids have kids. So Mrs. Meow, Mr. Barkey, make sure that you have something written about what to do about Mr. Barkey. You want to have him, information about him. Mr. Barkey likes to go to the bathroom at 5 o'clock every day. He likes wet food in the morning, half a cup of this, half a cup of that. His favorite treats are, milk bone liver flavor. And, he has to pee every night at 5 o'clock. You always have to take him out in the morning at 8 before you go to work. And he's friends with the dog that's 2 doors down. His vet is Dr. Doolittle. And he gets his shots every July for, whatever it is they get shots for. And his license is registered in the town of Hartford. So that's important information. Then you say, Karen's going to take Mr. Barkey. Karen doesn't want Mr. Barkey. Don't authorize somebody to take Mr. Barkey, because they may not want Mr. Barkey, and Mr. Barkey doesn't want them. So you can say something like, if any of you would like to adopt Mr. Barkey, please take care of him, or find him a good home. You can use, Facebook Marketplace, Offer Up, there's a pet finder website. If you cannot still find a place for him, you can put him in a no-kill shelter, and they'll foster him with different families until they find him a new home. But take care of your pets. And this is another one of those pre-planned things, like if your family's all upset they've lost you, Mr. Barkey's sitting at home waiting for dinner. He doesn't know what happened. They go to your house and you're like, oh Jesus, what are we going to do about the dog? Yeah. So make sure you have plans in place for Mr. Barkey and Miss Meow and, Greg the gecko and, your lizard or your gerbils or your fish, whatever. Make sure you've got something in place for them, because, they're depending on you. Let's go through the different types of disposition of your body, okay? First thing is, a lot of people say, oh, well, just donate my body to science. Well, do you know that you just can't do that? You have to fill out a registration form. You have to locate, first of all, it has to be within your state that you do this. You can't say, hey, I want to go to California, I want to be in Stanford. No, you can't pick that way. You have to go to a local school, because your body is only good to a medical school if it's within 48 hours of your death, and if all of your parts are contained. You can't have any trauma to anything that's severe. You have to have all your organs. You cannot have, are you ready? Cannot have cancer, COVID-19, hepatitis B, HIV/AIDS. You have to have all your limbs and all your organs. Now you have that organ donor card, your license with a little heart. They can take your eyes out of the hospital. They can take the eyes out and give them to somebody to help them see. The rest of you becomes a cadaver. A cadaver is now the medical school instrument of teaching, training, education, invaluable to medical students. I don't want to underplay this at all. I'm just saying it's invaluable tool, teaching tool for students to be able to practice opening up the body so that they get the feel of it. You can't get the feel of it with a latex dummy, because skin and latex are very different. And you know how far to go in before you've gone in a little too far. You can practice suturing straight so that when they're actually operating on real people, they know the feel, because your body helped them. Also in medical testing, you can be used, your tissue can be used. They can just study your hand and how all of the joints are connected and the muscles. They can study about carpal tunnels. They can look at arthritis. They can look at liver and how it, how a healthy liver looks or how a not healthy liver looks. Liver looks? This is so hard. I know this is a heavy subject, but we're taking it in very light steps to make it easier for you. And I did weeks of research to just rattle this stuff off the top of my head. So, but the main thing is like, say you're in a car crash and there's extreme trauma to the head, or part of your arm is missing or whatever. It's like the velvet rope of bodies. There's a Steve Rubel there saying, nope, all you gray people, you just go home, because you're not getting in. Isn't that ironic? He used to call people, the gray people, the ones that weren't going to get into the disco. Only the cool people got in. So anyway, we've got the Steve Rubel velvet rope here for medical facilities. The medical school does not want you, if you're older than 48 hours dead, or if you have any of those 4 things, cancer and all that stuff, wrong with you, or if you're missing anything. You can't have an autopsy on your system because you're all messed up from them looking for stuff, looking for clues. you're all messed up. So you can't be accepted for medical science or for the science care folks if you've had an autopsy, because nothing's in the right spot. Okay? I don't want you. And you have to be within the state if you die. So say you're down visiting Florida and you're in an accident, they can't take you. So you have to have a plan B in place. You do. If they do accept you, they will use you for up to 2 years in different projects for the students. You're so helpful to the students. It's really a wonderful, generous, selfless thing to do. So if they do use you, they finish with you, they cremate your remains, and they send your remains with a thank you letter to your family. But that's like 2 years up. And in the meantime, your family's like, should we have a service or something? You know, they have to, so you have to pre-plan that. So you can say, I have filled out the forms, and they give you a little card. If they accept you initially and say, when it happens, there's the card, it's with your driver's license. When the police find you, they find your license, they find the card, they call immediately the emergency 24-hour number, and a funeral director comes immediately, picks you up and takes you immediately to the lab. Somebody takes care of things right away. It has to be within 48 hours. If you want to donate to science, there is a group called Science Care. They're one of several groups, I believe. They're located in California, Texas, or Colorado, so you need to be in one of those 3 locations for this. They are a science for-profit company, and what they do is you register with them much like you would for the medical donation, but this is science, and they are a broad spectrum of uses for your cadaver. Now the word cadaver, by the way, is only used when you're donating your body for use in science or medical training or testing or teaching. That is when your body becomes known as a cadaver. Okay, it's not like Vincent Price and the Hammer horror movies that use that word all the time. It's not. Cadaver is only used as a naming who you are or what you are when you are in a medical donation situation or a science donation situation. So donating to science, again, they don't pay you, but they do cremate you for free and send your ashes with the death certificate and burial, transport and all that stuff. They send that to you afterwards. Now the science one sells classes to local medical students or scientists to come in. They have usually specific agenda, training on a new procedure or a new medical instrument that's been created. They practice on cadavers. They may also be teaching some kind of new topical solution, and you can see how it affects the upper layer of skin, or they, I don't know. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor training. All I can say is that they sell the classes to the local schools, and so the students come in, they've paid a fee, they use the cadavers or pieces of the cadaver to work on. Maybe they're just using the arm or whatever. And they also have another role, and this is kind of weird, but they will send parts of you all around the world. So other countries can do medical experiments, maybe testing out new topical solutions. You can be a crash test dummy for a car company, a real human being being a crash test dummy. They do that because, again, a latex weighted mannequin is not the same thing as a human being. And so if they have you strapped into the back seat, much like a Lady Diana, you remember when Lady Diana was in that terrible crash, she did not look physically as damaged as she was internally. And this may help them develop new airbag systems or new seat locks or something that would help future generations and cars become safer vehicles. So you can be a car crash dummy. You can be, your arm could be sent to Finland on dry ice for whatever use they have for it. You may have your leg sent to Australia for something. You don't know. It's kind of like the Amazon of body parts. So that's, again, you fill out the same type of form. You have to be in state when you pass, within 48 hours, same kind of rules. That's a real thin timeline. because you have to be discovered and delivered right away. Well, the first thing that happens is you're pronounced dead by a doctor in the hospital or at the place where it happened. You're rushed right away to the medical examiner's office. Now, science, generally, they will be done with you after about 3 to 5 weeks. So that's much less time that they use your cadaver. And they will cremate the remains and mail them to your family with a thank you note, much like the medical schools will do. So, I mean, those are 2 ways to donate your body to medical or science. Or how about cremation? What do you think about cremation? That is when they take your body and they put it in this thing called a retort. And it's kind of like a crypt shape or a long rectangular cement place where they put your body, and your body's in a like a pine box or a balsa wood box or a cardboard box. They put your body in, and extreme temperatures are strewn out of this hole in the ceiling of this cement thing, and it burns the body down to ash. Now, there's some bones that don't burn, and there's some metal pieces, like if you have a fake joint or if you have pins in your shoulder or things like that, they don't burn down. They use like a magnet and pull all that stuff out. If you have a pacemaker, a heart pacemaker, let them know beforehand. Let your family know to tell them, I want to be cremated. Let them know I have a pacemaker, because people have died that work in crematories because the pacemaker wasn't noted, and when they burned the body, the pacemaker exploded. And contrary to popular rumor, what they sweep out of that cement block is everything. It's everything. Now, there's some large bones that don't burn down. They're very brittle. And what they do is they put those in another machine that pulverizes them and makes them small, like the ashes. And they put them in and mix them in with the ashes. So it's the whole person, including their teeth fillings. And I know this for a fact because when I scattered my mom's ashes, one of her fillings was there. Boy, that was weird. It's all of it. It's about 5.5 pounds. If you're a larger person, now it takes a little longer it's like 2 to 3 hours. It may take another hour to burn a very large person. If you are 300 pounds or more, it will take more to burn you. And you actually go into a larger size box. They have different size box. They call them temporary urns. They're black boxes. They look like speakers with no sound. And they put the larger people in the extra large box, and then they put everybody else in this medium size. Pets have a little one. Pets are done in a slightly different manner. I'll discuss that in a minute. But that's a fire cremation. The temperature goes up to like 1700 degrees for about 3 hours. So that's a lot of fossil fuel, a lot of energy being used. Now, the smoke that's generated from the burning is sent up. Some places have filters that filter out toxic fumes from being released into the air, and some do not. Aldehyde is one of the top 10 most toxic chemicals listed, and a lot of undertakers who use formaldehyde in their embalming processes, before they started using protective gear for this, they were just dying of throat cancers and lung cancers because they were breathing it in. So it's very, very toxic material. Anyway, so they scrape all that out, they get everything in, they put you in a very thick plastic bag, and then they put that in the black, you can open the top up, but it's a black box they call a temporary urn, and then that is sent to the funeral home or for you to pick up. So let's go over water cremation. It's often called aquamation or alkaline hydrolysis. Now, alkaline hydrolysis is a speeded up natural decomposition of the body. And what it is basically a bath of water that you're set into, and then there's chemicals added. I think hydroxide, something hydroxide. I'm not a scientist. And it turns all of your soft tissue and organs into liquid, like coffee. And they drain that away. It's just soft, brittle bones left. Now, this process is kind of what you would naturally do on your own over a course of 10 to 25 years, except your fake breasts. That's another video. Over the course of 10 to 25 years, your body naturally decomposes this way and turns to liquid. It liquefies, and the bones are left. They're not as brittle, but they're there. So this water cremation, as it's known, is what they've been doing to pets for years. Yep. And you have these little urns and boxes you can have for your pets. You can actually, have your pets buried. So cute. They have these beautiful tributes to Mr. Barky and Mrs. Meow. So that's how they do cremations to animals, is actually in this process, because it speeds up a natural decomposition. Alkaline hydrolysis is probably the most eco-friendly of all of the body processes to do. It's very friendly in that it does not send billowing chemistry into the air. It's not having formaldehyde-laden bodies in hardwood caskets that also have more chemistry in them inside a cement vault, of which there's 800,000 pounds put into the earth every year, causing eco damage. This doesn't happen with the water cremation. So the brittle bones are left. They are dried overnight, and then they are pulverized, much like the leftover bones of a fire cremation. They are pulverized and then put into a bag. They're slightly lighter color and slightly different consistency than the fire cremation ashes, but it's the same. You can do the same things with them that you would do with cremation ashes, and we'll go over those distribution options in a moment. So the water cremation takes about 3 or 4 hours, and it totally liquefies all the soft tissue. So this has caused controversy with the process. Now, this has been done since the 1890s, I think, but people oppose this religiously. Apparently, they want to present you, because you were born whole on the planet, they want to present you back to God whole in one piece. Or if you're being cremated, at least it's your whole body that's in ashes presented. When you are water cremated, the excess liquids that you have been turned into, except for your bones, are drained away. The remaining bones are not your complete body, according to the religious groups who have stopped the legality of this in many states. There are only a handful of states that have this as a legal option. I think 15 states maybe make this, it's a legal option there, because the other 35 states are under the control of the religious groups who say, you can't make this a legal way to cremate, because it's not the whole body you're giving back to God. So, they believe this, and they feel that strongly that this is not for them, for their folks. And I believe it's mostly the Catholic Church that's doing this. They have a lot of control over the government, and the government has not released this process for being legal. Although it's legal, it's not legal to do it on humans because of this religious thing. But 15 states say it is legal. They'll let it happen in their state. It costs a little bit more than the fire cremation kind of cremation. I think as it becomes more legal across the board, and if you are ever voting on this, if there's ever a vote on this kind of thing, making it legal, please contact your senator or your whatever, and let them know, can you make this legal? Because it's earth friendly, it's a kinder, gentler way to go, and it does not pollute the environment. And it's like, I don't know, it's a no-brainer to me, but unfortunately it's illegal in 35 states to do a water cremation, except on animals. So you can still sort of have a more traditional looking ceremony for the church or for the meeting house or for the Elks Club, wherever you want to have your service, maybe celebration of life or whatever. Your cremation in that temporary urn can be placed inside of a casket. You can actually rent a casket from the funeral home, and they will have a closed casket, and you can have a funeral that people can relate to. If that's, somebody wants something a little more formal looking, you can rent that. But then when it comes to the actual burial, just your ashes would be buried. A box would be placed with flowers around it, maybe a portrait of the person at the graveside, and then the words are said, and then the box would be put down into the ground. Dirt on top of it, sod on top of that. And that's usually done after the family leaves, but sometimes the family wants to witness it, and that's fine. Legally, a funeral director has to stay at any burial to witness the closing of the grave. So once an urn is in and the dirt has been put on top, the funeral director can leave. When a body is in a casket, that's a slightly different thing. Let's go over a typical funeral, and then I'm going to talk about a different type of cremation after. So with a traditional service, as many of us think of a traditional funeral, is there's some kind of a visitation, either a closed casket or an open casket where the person is displayed looking peacefully at sleep. The community can come and show support to the families, pay tribute to the one who's lost. And then the next day, usually there is a service in a church or a place, and sometimes they have the service right at the graveside. If it's a military funeral, they'll have the gunshot. They have the taps being played, which kind of ironically now, I played trumpet in school, and it's weird now to see them. They hold up this thing that looks like a trumpet, but it's a speaker, and it plays taps through a speaker perfectly, of course. There's no sour notes or anything, which I guess is a nice idea. It looks like he's playing taps on a trumpet, but it's a speaker playing a recording. Hopefully it doesn't mess up. And a military funeral, military honors, is really, really quite emotional for me to watch. I always get tears in my eyes when I see them, and I do see a lot of the funerals. I don't work in the yard, I don't dig the graves, I'm in the office, but I do see an awful lot, and I talk to a lot of people about things. So when you have a formal funeral, your body then is released to the funeral home that you have pre-planned, or your family calls because they don't know what else to do. Well, we used, Sturgeon and Sons for grandma. Let's call them and have them going. They don't know anything about prices or anything. They just want them to go. Funeral director goes, gets the body, brings it back. Now they have a place where they do body preparation. Now you can be embalmed, which is when they take all of the body fluids out of you that can cause decomposition quickly, and they replace them with chemistry that preserves you a little bit. And they even have dyes that they inject to make your skin look more like when you were alive, more of this golden tone that I paint on every day. And the embalmer prepares the body, and they take all the bad stuff out and they put all the chemistry in. They also do makeup. They shave the faces, even the ladies' faces, because a cleanly shaved face takes the makeup better. They have to use special makeup. They do use some makeup that you can buy in a store, but because it is not the same skin that a warm person has, like your skin is warm, you're like, 90 degrees or higher, your skin. Well, makeup is made to meld into your skin. When you are not 90 degrees, because when you're dead, you're not 90 degrees anymore, it's cold. So they have to have almost like paint, like they're painting a wooden item. They're painting something. They're not putting makeup on, really. They're painting you. And so when you're being like made up, it goes on, the paint and everything else goes on you better if you don't have that little mustache and beard that all of us postmenopausal women are dealing with. But that's another video. But ladies, isn't that something? They shave your faces in the funeral home to put your makeup on even there. I've been talking about that for years. That you should do that. Anyway. And you look more human. And they fix things that are wrong. If you've got some damage done from an accident or whatever, they fix stuff like that and make you look nice. They clean you up. They fix you up. They make you look nice and peaceful. Kind of like a Madame Tussauds wax figurine in a way. And you are dressed in clothing that you chose or your family chose. Hopefully it's something you wouldn't mind being seen in for your last view for people. You're dressed and your hands are put on your chest or your stomach. Peaceful, sleeping, everything's nice. Your hair is washed and not really styled, but it's clean and neat. And you're presented to the public. Now they have 2/3 of the casket is open. The casket has to be selected by the family. Caskets can cost thousands of dollars. Now they have different levels of caskets, just like cars or anything else. There's levels of caskets, and there's lesser ones that are just kind of basic caskets. There's still a shiny hardwood, and then they have they go up to fancy colors, metal work ones, designer interiors. You can have different colors interiors. If you want a light lavender or you want light blue or light pink or light yellow, you can pick that. There's usually flowers that are draped over the casket. Those cost money also. You're gonna have Billie Eilish come and sing Ave Maria. And everything is extra. So some people will send flowers to the funeral home to be on display, but flowers themselves, $100, $200, $300 for a spray of flowers. These things later on are put on the grave and 3 days later are thrown away. I know this because it breaks my heart every time I see the guys going over to do it. So, you may want to go over after you've had a funeral or whatever. Maybe the next day go over and take the vases at least, from the flowers. There's nobody going to blow a whistle and say, hey, we were going to throw those away tomorrow. So, cut flowers are beautiful, and I think they do help people feel better. I really think flowers are just a wonderful, beautiful thing. And I don't mean to demean the flower industry by this, but they are gone. In a few days, they're gone. And they've served their purpose, made everything look lovely and smell nice, but they're killed off. After 3 days, they die on their own usually anyway. So those are done. Now the family will come for a service the next day, wherever the service is being held. Then the casket is closed and it is taken by hearse to the cemetery for burial. And the family is usually put in a lead car or a limousine, which again, I have to tell you, it's a mournful ride. It's a mournful ride. It's just not worth a limousine. You'd rather have your brother Ted drive everybody in his van, his SUV. Really. Seriously. Have your brother Ted drive everybody in the SUV and save that cost, because that's a cost. And there's costs that you can trim off of this so it's not quite so hefty, because you're not going to enjoy that limo ride. You're not going to enjoy more flowers. Really. And the embalming thing, you don't have to be embalmed, believe it or not. You don't have to be embalmed. But, you have to be aware that if you're not embalmed, your body is changing as you go through the day. Even your body's changing. Liquids are pooling. discoloration. You know, there's a lot of things that are not, they're alarming to see it because we're just not used to seeing that person looking that way. So embalming sometimes will give us a better, you know, perspective and a last goodbye to the person looking much better than they would have had they not been embalmed. So it's, you know, it's a double-edged sword here. Not environmentally very good, but psychologically to those viewing, it's helpful. There is a wonderful channel called Carrie the Mortician, K-A-R-I, the Mortician. She is a wonderful, she's an embalmer, an undertaker, she runs a funeral home. She talks about all aspects of funerals, how it's done. She gives you a tour of the embalming area. She discusses exactly how she does the embalming and everything, and how she starts with somebody and how they can reconstruct faces, what happens when somebody's been in the water for a while or, you know, had traumatic injury done to their heads. She's a really good channel for information like that because she's a nice person. You can tell she's a nice person, and she talks in very layman terms about everything, and it's very honest. I really like her a lot, and I've linked her channel below so you can see some of the videos of anything of interest to you on here. She does discuss a lot of the things I'm discussing today, but she has like 300 videos. The full mass happens, they have the hymns, they have the organ playing, people are crying, and the receiving line, maybe there's a receiving line, maybe not. Got the hearse taking the casket to the cemetery. Everybody's got a little flag on their car that says funeral, and all their lights are going. And they, you know, have the nice, it's a procession through town and then to the cemetery. Now they have dug a hole that's wider than the casket because they have to set first a vault, what they call a vault, into the ground first. And this is for all cemeteries. Before you can put a casket in, you have to have a cement, it's basically a cement box. And this cement box is, it's to protect the ground from sinking. Because your casket over time will wither away and weaken, and the ground can fold in around it, and then suddenly we've got a dip. And a lot of the older cemeteries, if you're walking through, you'll see a dip here and there, and it's kind of like, ew, that's where the person was buried, which is true. Probably caved in the casket, and that dip is missing earth from the casket that got caved in. You buy those usually from the funeral home, and they are made out of cement. Now you can buy designer vaults, just like cars. You can buy, and nobody sees this, really, nobody sees it, but you can have them when they're lined with stainless steel or bronze. You can have them painted a certain color, bright purple or something. You know, you can have them changed too. You can have your favorite tattoo artist do a thing. You have the gang do the tag on there. You know, you can do all kinds of things. After the casket is brought to the cemetery, there's a lowering device that's listed, and then there's what they call the greens are laid out, which are they look like fake grass carpets kind of all around the casket area. And then there's usually chairs set up. If it's raining, there's usually a tent set up. A minister or somebody will speak generally at this final goodbye. The spouse will throw a rose onto the casket, or all at the cemetery, caskets lowered. The guys come over, they lower the top of the vault down on top of the vault box that encases the casket. The funeral director has to stay for that. And sometimes they'll allow family under circumstances, if they're, you know, not going to jump on it or anything, they will let the family stay to watch that part. And then the dirt is added, and the funeral director can leave as long as that vault top is on there. He can say that this casket with that body in it was buried on this date, and it's a legal thing. He has to stay for that. So the dirt is put on over the vault, and then sod is put. There's like squares of sod. If you're a gardener, you know what I'm talking about. Squares of sod are put there so the grass will kind of grow. And they do seed and water and try to make it look like the rest of the lawn. But they did put all the flowers over the top of it, sideways, helter-skelter in some cases. So that's, and they stay usually about 3 days, 4 days. And then the guys will come around and collect them and throw them away. I think it's just really important for you to know that you can be a big part of your own funeral, and it's really not as painful as you think to plan it. I think it actually could be kind of fun and can make you really think about what's important in life and what's important to you and what you want to be known for after you're gone. So the cemetery, when you're driving through, you may think it looks really helter-skelter. There's just graves here, graves there. Some of them are old, some of them are new, some of them are real flat. Looks like a golf course with a flag in it. Some of them, hills and dales of all different kinds of monuments and everything. It's just kind of cool. Some of them are really kind of cool. How does anybody know where anybody is? Does somebody know where everybody is? If you call, every single cemetery has some kind of an office associated with it. You can look it up online and say, you know, Smithville Cemetery, Ohio, and it'll come up with a phone number to call. There's a phone number attached to an office that's in charge of that cemetery. And they're in charge of it because they have to mow the grass and trim the stuff and make sure all the graves are done and make sure everybody's named and there's no vandalizing and stuff. There's somebody in charge of every graveyard. And also, they have records dating back to whenever that graveyard was created. They have records of every single person that's in there. And what they do is, even though it looks helter-skelter, they have sections. They have large sections. They'll call this the front of the hill section, Section A. And then the back side of the hill, they'll call that Section B. And then on the side, they'll call that Section C. On the other side, maybe Section D. They may have a monument, and they'll call that the monument section. They may have, like, names for things, depending on the statue. If there's a big statue in the middle here and a big statue over there, they'll say, well, that's St. Francis, or that's, you know, Archangel Michael. You know, they have, like, kind of sections based on the location of the statues, usually. From the section, they divide it again into lots. Lots are groupings of 8 or 12 graves, and usually it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's usually like that. Those are the graves. And a lot of families in the old days used to buy lots. They used to buy a lot of 4 graves or a lot of 8 graves. And that's the family lot for Smith. And Matilda Smith may be in grave number 4. Those graves are within the lots. So we know exactly which grave your Aunt Matilda was when she died in 1971. We know exactly where it is. And we know exactly where it is because we have to do work on these things all the time. Like if something's starting to sink, they pull it out of the ground, they fill it with whatever foundation material, put it back, and set it so that everything's level. There's constant work being done in cemeteries, even though it doesn't seem like it. Unless there's a funeral, you think there's nothing going on. But I tell you, the guys who work in the fields of the graveyards are very busy, very busy. There's always something going on. There's funerals like every day of the week. You may think there's only funerals on Saturday. A lot of people have funerals during the week. It's actually less expensive too. Most cemeteries charge you less to bury your dead during the week. On Saturday, they have to pay overtime to the guy who fills in the graves. So they charge an extra, you know, $200 to $400 for the privilege of burying somebody on a Saturday. So that's something to think of too. Like, oh, bury me on a Friday. You know, bury me on a Friday. Save some money. And, you know, maybe it's more difficult for people to get to the funeral because they're at work, but, you know, you save some money for the family, and that's what we're thinking of at this time. Also, too, when you're thinking of cemeteries and you think of the different types of stones, gravestones, they have what they call the markers. These are flat markers. They're either made out of granite or they're made out of bronze. And there's sections of cemeteries that you can only have that kind of gravestone, the marker that's flat, and it can only be made out of granite, or it can only be bronze, because everybody else in the neighborhood has just bronze, so that's bronze. You have to order that. You can order it from anywhere. You don't have to order it from that cemetery or that funeral home. You can order it from anywhere. They have them on Etsy, they have them on Amazon. I don't know if they have Funerals R Us, but you can get those things online. Now the only thing is, if they do not meet the quality requirements of the cemetery, the person in charge of the cemetery, they may be rejected from use because they may be too flimsy. And if they're too flimsy or not put together very well, and they break or fall easily, it can actually cause damage to the mowers or to the trimmers, or actually fly up and become a projectile and hurt one of the workers. So they're very picky about the thickness, the height, and if anything's sticking out funny, how it's made. And if it's cheap, if it's too thin and it can blow, or the elements can take care of it and it would rust, and those pieces of rust will blow or whatever, they will not allow it in the cemetery. So it's not always good to save money in that way, but you know, depending on what you have, and if you find a good somebody who has good reviews, go for it. You can save a lot of money that way, because they do charge a lot of money at cemeteries and funeral homes for these things, because there's a little bit of a markup going on there. It's not just exact cost. And if you buy something, you can't just bring it in the back seat of your car and drop it down on the grave. It has to be installed onto the grave. And you know, there's a foundation, and then there's the die, what they call the die, and that has to be installed so that it's safe and that it won't fall over. So you have to pay these cemetery people to install it. So there's usually a charge per square foot of whatever it is they have to install. So you can plan on, you know, $500 to $1,000, depending on what it is you're installing. Same thing with one of those markers. Now, if you're a military person, that military marker is free. But cemeteries are fascinating, and a lot of times there's some interesting stones. They actually have trends in stones, and I know that you've seen like some of the older cemeteries. It seemed like a lot of people were getting the same kind of skulls carved into their graves. That was popular with that particular monument company for those years. They were selling this one or that one with the angel, or this one with the wings, or whatever. They had designs back then, but if it was something new, people got the new stuff. And right now, a really trendy thing is this teardrop, black granite teardrop. It is so cool. And I think what I'm going to do is show you a quick little slideshow of some really interesting gravestones. One thing you do need to know is that when you order a gravestone, they charge by the character or letter or number. So it's around $11 or $12 per letter or number. So just keep that in mind, like if you're putting a death date in, you want some little long cursive thing. I like the one with the lady had her fudge recipe on the back of her grave. Thought about all the people that say, nope, you're not getting my gravy recipe, or you're not getting my mac and cheese recipe. But this lady gave away her fudge recipe on her gravestone. I thought that was so cool. How much do gravestones cost, you ask? Those markers, they're 1 foot tall by 2 feet wide. They cost around $1,000. The stones that go like this, or heart-shaped, or whatever, can start around $1,200 and up to $20,000, depending on what you get done. Some of those fancy ones in the slide presentation, yeah, those are up in the ranks there. Now there is a wonderful person on YouTube, and her name is Caitlin, and she is on the channel called Ask a Mortician. And she runs a funeral business in California that specializes in what they call natural burials. She's very, very opposed to the embalming kind of funeral where, you know, there's a lot of toxic chemistry going on, there's a lot of earth space being taken up, there's a lot of what she feels is unnecessary chemistry and toxic stuff being used for somebody's death. And also the actual process of dying used to be a family affair. People used to have the visitations in their homes with the dead person. They weren't embalmed. They would keep them on ice, or you could have them on dry ice. They would have flowers and incense, and the person would be just there in a state of rest, and people would come and visit and hold the hands and bring food to the people, and then they would have a natural burial, either in like a seagrass basket or a plain wood coffin that could decompose. The body would decompose naturally. No toxic chemicals were put into the environment or to the air, and it was a very simple process, more hands-on for the family. Now, the funeral industry is more about keeping people away from the body and keeping the body preserved with artificial ingredients as long as possible so they look normal. It's a visual thing. And then, you know, they have the casket. It's like it's a big celebration for a lot of people, and they expect that from the funeral because that's the way we've been trained since the 1920s or 30s when the industry really took off, and that seemed to be the only way you had funerals. These other things were considered unusual and hippy-dippy, kind of new agey. That's not right. It's not right to do that to somebody, to let them, if they've already died, now we are now presenting them in their natural state to the earth. And Caitlin's channel, she does a lot of historical programs. She also discusses natural burials and different types of ways that you can go back to the earth naturally after you've died and not cause a huge carbon footprint when you go. You know, it's kind of like you become part of the earth again rather than against it. You know, so I really love Caitlin, and she has a great sense of humor. She's a really talented and interesting person, and I really admire her work. And I know that I would personally love to have her take care of my funeral. But anyway, now there's several types of what they call a natural burial. One of the most common ones is a burial at sea. Now I think this was really popular in naval, the naval service, where they had servicemen who passed away from the war and they needed to not keep the bodies on board. They would present them to the ocean with a ceremony, and they would be, you know, swept to sea with, you know, full honors and everything. And now you can do that. The Neptune Society is one of the groups that kind of made it popular. They started doing that quite a while ago, where that you'd pay a certain fee They would wrap the body in a weighted outfit or box that was weighted, a biodegradable box that was weighted, and they would put the body into the ocean. It would weight and sink to the bottom. And they would have, you could have your priest or your minister or whatever speaking at that time, throw roses into the water. You can also do this with your cremains, which are cremated ashes. They call them cremains. I write that word at least 20 times every day on some document. Cremains. Isn't that cute? Anyway, you can put your cremains, your cremated ashes, in a beautiful, paper or cardboard container, and you can present it to the water with roses. You can say poems, you can film it, and it sinks gently into the ocean. Now, there are rules and regulations for this type of burial. It is legal. You have to be at least 3 nautical miles from shore. So you can't just stand on the edge of the beach and throw grandma's ashes into the water. You just can't do it. You have to get a permit. If you're going to do a sea burial, usually there are groups, not necessarily just the Neptune Society, there's other groups that do it as well. And funeral homes also have branches that can deal with this and set you up with somebody who will do it for you. The cost for that can be from $500 up to $5,000, depending on if you're bringing a large group with you. You're going to have a full ceremony. Are you having a reception afterwards? The cost can change depending on what your needs are and what happens. If you're just taking a small boat out with a friend with the remains, you have to get a permit with your town to do this with the remains, and that has a cremation certificate, and the place of burial has to be noted with the town hall. Now, the town clerk usually has the statistics of deaths, births, marriages, divorces, things like that, and they have to be kept abreast of where everybody is. They want to know where everybody is. Even after you die, they want to know where you are. If you are going to do a full body burial at sea, you have to be in at least 600 feet of water. It has to be at least 600 feet of water, so that's a lot further away from shore. And that for a reason, obviously. You don't want to have grandma floating by when Timmy and little Amy are playing at the side of the water. So burial at sea is probably the most common thing that we know when we hear the term natural burial. Now, there is another one where you have your cremains or ashes mixed with soil, and you're placed under a tree. And there's special forests that were bought by this company called Better Place Forests. And they have a lot of different forests around. I know there's one in Connecticut in Litchfield that they own. And what they do is they have trees marked with numbers, metal plates with numbers on it. And you can be buried under, say, tree 321. And they will plant 50 trees in your honor for part of this service. They will mix your ashes with the soil and bury you under the tree. Now, I had contacted them to see if they could give me a little more information on, how they have the maps, how things are mapped out, how people can find you where you're buried, what the cost is to have the plaque on the tree with your name on it that you're under there. But once they found out that I wasn't interested in purchasing this process myself, I was actually just looking for information, they didn't get back to me. So I can't really speak for exactly all that. I can say that it costs around $7,000 to have this process done, and you are forever part of the forest. And the reforestation project is because of you. You've got 50 trees planted in your honor. And I really love that concept. I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and it is an option for a natural style burial. Now, there are natural cemeteries, they're called, and you can have a natural burial in all 50 states. It's legal to to have a natural burial in all 50 states. It's just that most funeral homes, this isn't their jam, you know, it's not their jam. They don't, no, they just don't, okay? Nobody asked for it, so we don't do it, you know, no. So a natural burial is when your body is cleaned and shrouded and placed in a seagrass wicker basket or a very light wood, very easily decomposable box. And you are placed, even just your own body wrapped in a shroud is placed at the bottom of a hole that's dug, and then you are buried with the soil, and you are marked with a natural stone. Maybe there'll be a plaque on the stone, I don't know. And that is a natural burial. There's no embalming, there's no chemistry, there's no fire, there's no water, there's no nothing. It's just you and the earth and the shroud, and maybe the seagrass basket. Now, that's the kind of funeral that, like, Caitlin's funeral home does, and there are a lot of funeral homes that will. Unfortunately, there's only about 150 to 200 natural cemeteries in the United States. And when you think about, like, your own small town probably has at least 2 cemeteries right in your own small town, how little that is as far as compared to other cemeteries. So there's a lot of cemeteries that have a section they may allot to natural burials, but I think it's an uncomfortable thing because it's new and it's new agey sounding, and they're just not, why can't we just do it the way we always have, kind of a feeling to it. I think that there are some regulations as far as the EPA is concerned, and that is you can't be closer than 100 feet from a water source or wetlands. And in New England, that's really hard because just about everything in New England is within 100 feet of a water source or wetlands. So I know that Connecticut, I don't think in Connecticut you can do that kind of natural burials. You don't have to legally have a casket for your burial. You can be buried without a casket, but you do have to have the vault in the cemetery, and in some cases there has to be a funeral director present. So if you want to bury Grampy in the backyard, you actually can, but you have to get a permit, and it's very hard to get a permit because there has to be a measurement made. It can't be within 100 feet of another building or your neighbor's property. And there has to be a permanent easement of your property because now your property is becoming a cemetery, and that has to have a permanent easement made. Your property value goes because you've got a grave on your property. Not only does it creep out your neighbors, but your potential buyers of your home, because Grampy's died, we want to sell the house, bury Grampy on the grounds. Now the house has got to have that easement on the deed. So there's a lot of issues with something like that. Now, if you have acres of farmland and Grampy worked the land all his life and he wants to be buried there, and you've got plenty of room, then go for it. And sometimes these kinds of places already have a small graveyard that somebody else started in the 1800s with their family. So you can just add Grampy to their graveyard, you know. But again, the vital records folks down at Town Hall want to know where everybody is, and if they're in your yard, you got to make sure you have a permit to have them there. So it is legal to bury in your backyard, but there has to be permits, and a funeral director has to be present for the burial to prove that person was put in the ground. So Luke Perry was buried in what was known as a mushroom suit. Now this caused a huge stir back in 2019. We tragically lost this beautiful young actor at age 50. He was very famous in a TV show in the 1980s about Beverly Hills teenagers. He was a real heartthrob back then. Anyway, what he decided to do was be completely environmentally friendly with his burial. His family was on board with this, He wore what was known as a mushroom suit. And what that is, it looks like a black pair of pajamas that have sewn into them lines of mushroom spores. It looks a little futuristic, like a laser tag costume or something. And it's cotton, black cotton, that is biodegradable. His body was not embalmed. The mushroom spores are sewn into the actual clothing. His body was laid down there in this suit. And he was buried with soil, covered with lilies on the top. They had their service. And as his body decomposes, the theory is that the mushroom spores feed on all the toxins that he's releasing and turns them into positive things for the soil, for the environment. So it's a positive, eco-friendly way to have a burial. And I thought it was really admirable of him to choose this method. It was his choice for burial. And it's very interesting. I think those suits cost around $700 to $1,000. And as opposed to cremation, which is $1,200 to $2,500, as opposed to embalming in full casket funeral, which can be up to $10,000, $15,000. Boats and water burials can be up to $5,000. So water cremation around $3,000. So there are costs for any kind of burial that you have, natural or not. So you just have to keep that in mind. Can you be buried with Mr. Barkey? Can you? Only some states allow you to be buried with your dog or your cat or your reptile or your fish or your bird. Now, I did a video last year about the Methuen, Massachusetts pet cemetery, and at that time a law was recently passed, as in like 2020 I believe, that humans could be buried along with their pets. A casket and then the pet casket or whatever, pet box or whatever, can be buried together in one grave. This is illegal in almost all states. I think there's only 4 or 5 states that allow you to be buried with your dog. Now the pet cemetery, I actually showed a couple of graves where they showed the human and the human's information and then the dog's information, and the dog's picture was the big one on the top. Because you know, people love their dogs, you know, and it's like, I want to be buried with Mr. Barkey. So you can do it. It's just that you have to find a cemetery that allows it and a state that allows it. And Massachusetts is one of the states that allows it. So you can see I'll link it below, my pet cemetery video. I talk about that, and you know, that you can be buried. So humans and animal remains cannot be put in generally in any cemetery. And it has been attempted, believe it or not. People actually dig a hole next to Grampy's grave and put Grampy's Mr. Barkey next to him. And then they cover it up loosely and they walk away, and overnight all the animals in the forest say, hey, dinner's served, and they go and dig up Mr. Barkey and eat him, or eat part of him and drag the rest of him around. And in the morning, the cemetery cleanup guys go around and taking the beer cans off the graves, and taking the bottles of peanut butter whiskey off the graves, and taking the, you know, the crap off the graves that people put on graves, candy bars and balloons and everything else. They have to take that stuff off so everything looks dignified and clean and nice, and that these things don't blow over onto, you know, Miss Priss Librarian's grave next door. She doesn't want your neon colored heart balloon. She doesn't want your candy bar. She doesn't want the Coors beer can that you put there to share with your friend for last time. So these things are regulated, and they found the bones of this dog and parts of this dog all over this section near Grampy's grave. So they knew who it was, and they contacted the family to come take your dog. They could have taken legal action and called the police. But you can't bury your dog with you. If you are most cemeteries won't allow it, and in most states it won't allow it. So you have to check the laws in the state that you live in to see if they allow it. And if they don't, why don't you write to your senator or whatever and say, hey, can you legalize it so that we can have pets urns in with ours in a grave? And what's the big deal? Yeah. So you can be shot into space. It's kind of neat. There is a company that actually sends a rocket up into space with your ashes attached to the rocket. Take a picture of the flight and they send it off into space and it explodes them in space somewhere. And your ashes are up there in Star Trek land. And they send you a picture. They send a picture of the flight and, your name and the dates and all that and what is the general direction of where you were sent. They send it to your family. So you've got this certificate of the picture of your flight. So I think that's kind of cool. Now also you can be buried in the coral reef. Your ashes are put into a ball of something natural, and it's stuck down into the coral reef in it, and the coral feeds on your ashes. Your ashes have some kind of value to them, nutritional value, and the coral feeds on it, and then the fish that feed on the coral come, and then the fish that feed on the fish that feed on the coral come, and then those bigger fish come to feed on those fish who feed on the coral. So it helps the sea ecosystem. You can see through a window at the barrier reef down there, the coral reef down there, that you'd be part of it. It's kind of an interesting way to share your ashes. So afterlife, again, you're benefiting future mankind and womankind. You can be made into art. You can be made into beautiful blown glass. Your ashes can be put into artwork, paintings, 3D paintings, beautiful stuff. There's a young man in England who started a company that makes record LPs and puts your ashes in the final press. So you can have your favorite songs, a recording of you talking, or nothing at all, just the sound of the crackle of your ashes in a record album. And that's kind of an interesting thing to do if you're into music. You can have your ashes strewn anywhere. Now there are rules and regulations for parks. Now a lot of people like different natural parks, the Grand Canyon or whatever. You're technically supposed to get a permit to spread ashes in a park. I think it's more of a don't ask, don't tell situation where if you're doing it, you're doing it. If they catch you, as long as, like my mom said she wanted to be buried at the place that she loved to play as a child. Well, scattering her ashes is one thing in an area, but piling them up on the seesaw seat is another. You cannot have like all of them stuck together or the box right there. You've got to spread them out so they're not in a pile, and they can't be anywhere when it's general public access. So like if you're gently spreading them at the side of the hairpin turn, you're not spreading them right there on the road. You're spreading them off on the hillside and the wind takes them all over. So they're not an actual ash pile. So that's kind of a regulation, all across the board, but you can spread ashes wherever you want. So that's something that's nice to know. And I like the fact of being spread across something. But I will tell you, when I spread my mother's ashes, and she had said she wanted to have them spread where she grew up, and as a young child in the Depression, she used to love to go to her great aunt's house, and her great aunt was married to a wealthy man, and they had a house that was given to them and they let my mother and her brothers play in the yard, and it was the happiest time. It was a happy memory for her, and she wanted her ashes spread there. And it was a big old haunted house in Waterford. Any of you who know the area on Rope Ferry Road know the house I'm talking about. But it was in our family, and I spread her ashes right next to that house. And you know, I put the box, the temporary urn, down next to the tree that had the majority of her ashes. And I left, and over time I sold it to a public person who put a fence around the whole area. And when I went back to visit my mother's ashes and where I spread them, I couldn't get in. And it was such a weird, I felt like a little kid that couldn't see my mom, you know. I was crying at the fence. I mean, I knocked on the door and asked the lady if I could go in, that I'd spread my mother's ashes there, and she just looked at me horrified, and she said, "No, and I'm calling the police if you trespass." And I was like, I felt so lost, you know. So when you tell your kids to spread your ashes in a particular place, be mindful of that, because it hurts me. Every time I drive by there, I know I can't see her, but what's even weirder now is where I spread her ashes is becoming a housing project, and there's a road there now. Where I spread her ashes is a road. And lastly, there is a jewelry that you can either be made into the jewelry stones themselves, or there's pretty jewelry that's hollowed out and it holds some ashes in the back. There's like a hole that you put a tiny little funnel and put some of the ashes in it, and then they have a stopper and some super glue, and you push that into the back, and you can carry some of the ashes in this beautiful piece of jewelry. And those jewelry pieces are nice. You can also have yourself made into a pair of cufflinks, your ashes made into cufflink stone. Diamonds and things can be made from your ashes. So there's a lot of really neat things on Etsy and Amazon, and you can get your ashes turned into a lot of different things, which is kind of bizarre. So what if you don't have any money, no family, nobody steps up, no coworkers, nobody steps up, you're just this person who the town probate takes over for you. They look out for you. And what they do is they generally will bury you in a communal grave in a town cemetery, and they will, if they have your name and information, they'll have that information in their vital records, statistics, as being buried in that grave, in that lot, in that section of that cemetery, and that's it. There's no marker on the grave that says you're there. You're just buried there. So they do take that. They sell all of your personal items, or they donate them to charities, and destroy anything that's not of any value to them. But it's not quite the same thing as having a service or a tribute or a life celebration. So in a cemetery, there's different types of graves and sections. And they have, for regular burials with a casket, they have the option of being in the ground grave, and some cemeteries have what's known as a building called a mausoleum. Now, mausoleum is a house of crypts, and basically it's carved out long rectangles in cement walls, and the casket is put in that cement rectangle box, and a faceplate is put on the front, and their name is put in bronze letters on the front, and the death and birth date. Sometimes you can have a little picture, cameo there of them. Those are called crypts, and those are kind of interesting. They have crypts that go side by side, and those are called couch crypts, because the casket goes in the long way. They have companion crypts, which means there's enough space for two. So the first person who dies gets pushed to the back one, and then when the next person dies, they're put in the front. But they're side by side, long ways. It's called the couch crypt. Now the other kind is long ways, and they have one that's called a tandem crypt, and that goes really long. That's 2 full-length caskets this way. So it's 2 caskets, but they're only taking like this much space on the front faceplate, and both their names are put on the faceplate and their dates of death, and you can have a picture of both of them together. And then the other type is the true companion, which is the side-by-side casket next to each other. Those kinds of crypts are very popular. Now each crypt level, it has levels. Instead of being on the ground going like this, it goes up like this, and your grave is your level. So you actually start just below ground. One below ground is called the Westminster level. And then you have what's known as the prayer level. It's level 1. It's the most expensive one. Level 2 is the heart level. Level 2 is also expensive. Level 3 is your eyesight level, your visual level, your touch level. And then we've got, 5, 6, 7, 8, like heaven levels. Heaven levels are less expensive because they're so high you can't really like put your hand on it or look at it or see the name in front of you. So because they are so high up, they call them the heaven levels. They're closer to heaven. They're also cheaper, financially cheaper to go there. Now, the mausoleum itself is usually quite an elegant looking building, usually a marble, a light color marble. And there's usually stained glass or sculptures, or there's like a table with candles on it. And you can actually put money into this, almost like a vending machine, and tap on the candle of your loved one, and it'll light a candle for them in honor of them for 24 hours. It's kind of neat. It's a beautiful place. It's protected from the rainstorms, from the snowstorms, from extreme sun. Your endowed payment is what pays for the building maintenance. And in general, usually when you buy a cemetery plot, you are buying the rights to bury somebody in that plot. When you buy a mausoleum crypt, you are paying for the rights to bury somebody in that mausoleum crypt. They usually have to have a crypt liner, because that's kind of the equivalent of the cement box in the ground, but this one actually prevents problems from happening if the casket top raises for any reason, for liquid or gas type of stuff, because the body is decomposing. Either with or without embalming, it's still decomposing. So they have a crypt liner over the casket. There's a drain plug for liquids to drain, and there's a gas leakage hole for gas to escape. So well-maintained mausoleums, they have to have the roof structurally sound. All around the edge has to be trimmed and manicured, and shrubs taken care of, and things like that. Benches are there. So there's usually a larger endowed care, what they call endowed care fee, when you buy a crypt in a mausoleum. Those crypt prices usually around $6,000 to $15,000. And if you get double depth ones, it's usually around $20,000 for a double depth crypt or double crypt kind of thing. They have cremation walls, which are columbariums. They have them on the wall of the inside and outside of a mausoleum. Those are called niches, and the wall itself is called a columbarium, and they have little cement openings for your temporary urn or your urn to go in. A faceplate is put on, and it has your name and your dates on it. It's a small space, so you can't have the same kind of big bronze lettering that you would have on the full-size casket monuments. So they also have standalone, they look like skyscraper apartment complexes, niches. They're called columbariums, and there's usually a statue on the top, and then there's this circular building that has little niches all around it. and those hold one or two boxes or urns, temporary urns, for that, and you can have a faceplate on that. Those are usually restrictive in how you can decorate. You know, it is what it is, just what it is. So I was thinking a mausoleum, you know, when I walked through the mausoleum, I was touring, you know, cemeteries and stuff that we deal with, and I could not stop thinking of the tall man in Phantasm, that he was going to come walking around the corner with that spike on the end of that spear was going to come, you know, the watchdog thing in that movie Phantasm. It was a mausoleum. It looked just like, every mausoleum kind of looks the same inside. It's kind of all marble walls, really tall, and people's names in there. They don't have pull-out drawers, though. I mean, you can't do that. Those are sealed faceplates. They don't come out. There's not a drawer. I mean, it's those are in there, you know. And I've seen them before they did a burial. I've seen the back end of them. I've seen how they are constructed. They put marbles or roll the casket on like the Egyptians did 100,000 years ago. It's kind of neat how they did that. So, yeah, the mausoleums tend to be more expensive than the ground graves because you've got the protection of the building, the maintenance of the building, and when you're buying a ground grave, which costs around $1,400, by the way, a ground grave requires maintenance all year long. You know, and it's not just your grave, it's the whole place. They have to mow, they have to trim. If your marker is settling, they have to raise that up so it's even. When you pay into an endowed care fund, it's actually not being used now. People buying graves is what pays for the maintenance of the grounds right now. But the endowed care is placed into a fund for the future. So in 30 years from now, when they actually have a new maintenance crew, new people, they're taking care of the graveyard. Have you ever seen pictures of graveyards that were abandoned because they ran out of money? And you see the nature's taken back over. There's hay growing everywhere. There's plants everywhere. There's vines all over the graves. It's really heartbreaking to see that. And when you are paying into endowed fund, you are preventing that because that's the fund they pull from. Now, when you purchase a cemetery plot, you are not buying real estate. You are not, it's not like you bought, you know, a strip of land. You have actually bought a burial right. R-I-G-H-T. You have bought the right to put somebody in that spot. They don't care who it is. But you have paid for the right to put somebody in that spot. And you can put a stone in some places. Some places you have to have a flat stone. Some places you can put this kind. You can do whatever you want as far as selling it to somebody else. But you are not buying the real estate. The cemetery owns all of the land that the graves are in. You don't own that land. You own the right to put somebody in that land. So in most cemeteries you can put 4 cremation urns or 1 casket with 2 cremation urns on top of it in one grave. So if you have a family and you all want to be cremated, you can buy, you know, 1 grave and the kids and your wife can go in there with you. So, you know, your wife, you, and your 2 kids can all go in 1 grave. You can get markers for each of you for that grave. So it's quite a savings. Some people don't know that. They think it's 1 grave, 1 person, but that's not true. You can put up to 4 urns of cremation ashes in each grave. As you get closer to monuments in some cemeteries, it costs more. If you get closer to the road away from the monuments, it's less costly. So it's cheaper to be alongside of the road, believe it or not, than it is to be right up next to the statue. Now, it could be very helpful for you to pre-install your monument stone like my father did. I'm so grateful he did that. You were burying him to have all that done, and I did hire the local monument company to come in and sandblast in his death date. You know what's kind of neat about the blasting in numbers and letters and things like that is you can call any monument company, and what they do is they come and they do kind of a rubbing of the grave to get the right font and the right font size, and they take it back and they make a template of that, and that's what they tape onto the grave, and they sandblast using their template so that it matches the exact lettering and size of what's already there. So you don't have to call the same company that made the original grave, because a lot of times they're not even in business anymore. That's why it's like $11, $12 per letter or character, because they have to do all of that for each letter and everything. They have to make sure it's all straight and that it lines up correctly and it's the right size. That they don't take the monument out and put it back in. They keep the monument right there and work right there in the cemetery. So I think after you get all this stuff done with the funeral and you've got all your papers together, you can actually use a lot of these papers to your advantage. Like, you know exactly where your passport is, you know exactly where your insurance is, you know exactly where your bank account information is, or your car loan. If you're about to come to the end of your car loan, you can check, you know exactly where it is. If you need to fill out any new paperwork for a new home improvement loan or anything like that, you can use paperwork that you have in this folder. So collect all your very important paperwork and enjoy it in this life as well. And once you have all of this filled out, and really just get something like this, fill out what you can. Again, pretend you're being interviewed like a celebrity. At least get this done. And one last little thing I want to discuss is your will and testament. Your last will and testament is something you can download off of the internet and templates, and you do them yourself, and you can go have them notarized. If you go to a lawyer, it's usually for a basic will and testament, it's usually around $300. But that's important to name your executor. I mean, you don't have to get all boggled down with all the details that you have like in this book, but you can say, I want my executor to follow the rules that I have listed in this book about my funeral arrangements, my cremation, even my DNR, my do not resuscitate paperwork would be, in here as well. I think it's important that you have your will and testament made, because if you don't have an executor listed, the town will have the next closest relative to you be your executor. And you may not think that what your sister or your brother wants for you is exactly what you want for you, because families are different. As you know, we're not all the Waltons. We're not the Brady Bunch. Families don't know each other as well as we'd like to think. I mean, if I was living with a guy and he knew everything, he has absolutely no legal right to anything, to say anything, because he and I are not married and he's not a relative. So the court has to look at the next legal relative and the next legal spouse for that information, and they'll be in charge. So you don't want that to happen. I mean, one of the saddest cases I ever saw was Kevin Aquan. He was a makeup artist. Of course, I do a makeup channel, so I know this stuff. He was a makeup artist. He was living with another man. They were madly in love. They couldn't get married back in those days. Men couldn't marry men back in those days. When he died, his partner had absolutely no rights to any of the information, the stuff in their house together, nothing. The parents came in because they were the legal guardians that the state recognized. They came in and took all the stuff and took him and buried him in another town that he probably wouldn't have wanted to be buried in. And this partner who knew him and what he wanted had no rights at all. A will and testament is important because your executor has to be picked, or the court picks him for you. And that's key. That's really key. Because if you want somebody to do everything in this book, make sure your executor is the person that would do this stuff that you want. And call these people too and let them know, hey, did you know I'd really like you to be the executor of my estate? Just bring it up. Have breakfast or something with them and bring it up. you know, because they may not understand that concept. You know, it's an awkward conversation, but it's an important one. Just like this whole video is really important for you to watch. And I'm so glad that you have spent the time with me today. Thank you so much. Please like and share this video. Subscribe if you can. It always helps me out. And take care. Toodles.